Hi folks, Chuck Hennon again here. This is going to be the first video for week 2, and I apologize for being late. There seems like a long list of things that are conspiring to prevent me really recording this, and you're probably asking yourself, why didn't you record it beforehand? And I'm sure a lot of you are like me. I'm a very deadline-driven person, and so I've got a long list of deadlines kind of receding into the horizon, and I always feel like I'm holding other people up, and so we all are juggling many balls, and I did not anticipate having so much trouble making these videos. It is a kind of a leap into another technology, and I played around with it some, and I thought, hey, I can do this, but also the software in Ubuntu, like I mentioned, it's been a little bit tricky. You kind of lose your confidence in a program after it crashes a few times, and you start thinking, is this going to be wasted effort? But we'll try to keep it simple and still keep it interesting. So yeah, welcome you to week 2, and sorry we're getting a slow start, and we'll have to look at whether we can have these small group meetings this week. We may have to put it off till next week. I apologize. I'm just kind of overwhelmed. It's the start of the semester for everybody, and I've kind of haven't really gone through this fall routine in a while, and I kind of got blindsided by a few things. So anyway, so just some general comments. Really, I love the intro videos. I really appreciate that you're all trying so hard. Some of you really are setting the bar pretty high and making me look kind of bad, and that's kind of one of the reasons. I feel a little bit insecure here because I want to do this well. This is something I feel like I need to learn how to do, and I feel like I haven't been doing it very well. And so I'm going to try to get into a groove here making these videos, and we'll have a lot of guest lectures, but I want to kind of add on to those guest lectures occasionally. So anyway, there's going to be 2 videos this week from me. I think Dr. Lohman is also going to supply a short one. So there's the course overview this week. The first video is just going to be simply an introduction to tropical Asian forestry, and the second video is going to be about citizen science and tropical forestry. And I think that's kind of what we're going to be doing in the field. We're mainly going to be talking about tropical Asian forestry and kind of getting up to speed on issues and discussing issues there. And then video 2, kind of introducing the concept of what we'll be doing in the field and what you're going to be doing in your projects and things. So another general comment I'd like to make is about the title of the course. I'm calling it Tropical Asian Forestry, and I'm kind of using the term forestry on purpose because I think it's a broad term and includes all aspects of forest ecology, management, and conservation. We're really not going to be able to save many of the primary forests if we don't bring all these forestry practices together, both kind of the productive and the conservation practices. If we don't bring them under one roof, we're really not going to be able to save that much, I think. The idea of putting fences around what's left is just not going to work. Fortunately, this kind of thinking has become fairly widespread, and there are lots of projects out there. Lots of biodiversity corridor projects are being incorporated in, green cities, being planned, lots of green space. There's a large project that's funded by the Asian Development Bank right now in Indochina, the Greater Mekong sub-region, where they're trying to incorporate all of the different biodiversity corridors along with the development and try to connect, the forest that exists, and keep in mind, how the infrastructure is going to be laid out geographically. And I think it's a really good idea that all of this is being thought of beforehand instead of kind of doing triage later. And there's a lot of great community level integrated landscape approaches, where people are doing some very interesting stuff, working, like following the kind of the Dan Jansen model of really committing to one place and really being active there and being a persistent presence and that kind of thing. That kind of management approach, that kind of conservation approach can be very powerful. And so anyway, in this first video, we're going to be talking about tropical Asian forestry. And so first, kind of want to make the comment that, in my opinion, forest conservation and management is probably one of the most challenging sciences you can choose to pursue. I mean, so I'll kind of pat you on the back and say you did a good job choosing something that's really going to maybe keep you up at night, make you quite stressed and frustrated. But it's a very important thing because you're trying to couple two things that are very different, forest ecosystems and human societies and economies. Those two things occur at very different rates. And so you're trying to bring these two systems together sustainably, and that's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, so I think we're really facing some of the biggest kind of scientific, cultural, philosophical challenges, and trying to bring all those things together is going to be a great challenge, and it obviously has been for quite a while. So there's been some pretty interesting publications out there. In 2007, Liu et al. Published a paper about these coupled human-natural systems. I think that's a kind of a nice way to think about it. And they examine the dynamics of these systems globally to kind of attempt to find any kind of generalized patterns. And so that, they're looking in the tropics, they're looking in the high latitudes in developed countries and developing countries, just to see if they could see any kind of general patterns. And unfortunately, most of the general patterns they found aren't that surprising, really, and they're not terribly useful, except for the pointing out the fact that some of these community level things are probably the most powerful things. So, these coupled human-natural systems, they're non-linear and they have thresholds, and so they don't respond smoothly to different policy practices or different economic forces. And they can actually reach a threshold where they suddenly change state and where all bets are off and the properties of the system change dramatically. And so, that makes them difficult to plan and predict and manage sustainably. Policies can have perverse effects. Like one example in their paper in China, a policy that they created, a tax policy that they created, made a great proliferation of the households, and suddenly, people kind of figured out a way to kind of get around some tax or take advantage of this tax, and they all split up into lots of small households, and that actually made it much more difficult bureaucratically, and it kind of complicated other policies that they were in place. And then, management is now required for that system. Kind of direct management is now required. Of course, there are legacy effects and lag times. Every situation has a history. You have political rivalries that you didn't anticipate, that kind of thing. And then when you implement a policy, it could take 5 years before you really see the effect of that policy on behavior in people's management and so forth. There's a lot of heterogeneity, of course. I mean, tropics, temperate zones, developed versus developing countries. Of course, there's a lot of differences in all of those systems. And so the issues are oftentimes highly site-specific, and so it's actually kind of difficult to pull out generalizations about these kind of coupled human-natural systems. Another thing I kind of think is very important and want to highlight is this idea that, well, it's not an idea, it happened last year, I think, that more people live in urban environments than in rural environments now. So most of the world's population grows up in a city, completely removed from kind of natural systems. They grow up in a human-controlled environment, human-designed environment, and so they don't have much direct exposure to natural systems and natural cycles. And so in many ways, I think this is going to be a major challenge. I mean, we're all familiar with the kind of the general trends of population, water, energy, and so forth. But I think this is kind of going to be a difficult challenge in terms of policy and managing how people respond to nature, or what their expectations are from nature, right? Because if so little of the population is actually aware of how natural systems work, it's very difficult to explain to them why you need a particular policy. And so I think that those things are going to be very challenging. And a topic I kind of like to bring up through the semester, and I think it's a very interesting one, is whether or not sustainability is a natural concept. And so we all use sustainability all the time. Managers everywhere talk about, from business to forests, wetlands and everything. Sustainability is a very hot topic, and I think in some ways there isn't enough discussion about what sustainability really is, because we may think that, oh, why are we so stupid that we'll mess up our environment? Why do we ruin our environment that we live in? But that's the way natural systems work. I don't really think there are many examples out there of sustainable use of natural resources by a population of individuals. And I don't really think in humans, we haven't really transcended our animal nature yet. And so this idea of developing sustainable management practices is in a way kind of unnatural. I mean, we have to go against kind of physical, biological properties of ecological systems. And so when we discuss sustainability, I think it's really important if we recognize, okay, this might not be something that is a natural property. And so we have to be supernatural or something like that. And that can lead to all kinds of philosophical discussions. But I think kind of recognizing that sustainable behavior isn't natural. It's not, natural selection is not going to lead to sustainable populations. We see flux in natural systems all the time. And so really sustainable behavior is kind of unnatural. And I would like to propose that it should be equivalent to moral behavior. So kind of morality of behavior should be basically judged by whether or not it's sustainable, whether it's leading towards sustainability or not. And immoral behavior would be behavior that's leading, towards unsustainable practices. And I think that's, something I would like to discuss with all of you and kind of think about as a concept as we go through the course. And kind of thinking about sustainability, I mean, kind of in the Jared Diamond strain, his book Collapse, where you go back and look at ancient civilizations and how they developed and how they collapsed. There's a very nice publication here in 2007 where they actually looked at the East Asian monsoon and how it affected the development of populations on both sides of the Atlantic. So the ancient classic Mayan civilizations and the Tang dynasty, and if you look in the graph there on the lower right, there's an amazing amount of synchrony there, and it's also linked to dry periods. And so during extreme drought periods, civilizations were collapsing on both sides of the ocean. And so that's pretty good evidence that, civilizations are obviously vulnerable to climate change. And I would like to propose, climate change is also another big hot topic. Civilizations are most vulnerable. This is something that Jared Diamond suggested, that they're most vulnerable to climate change when they're near their natural limits. And given the many trends around the world for water, food, energy, I'd say that the Earth is actually pretty close to its natural limits for human population. And, we're going to have to change our behavior. It's just a matter of fact. Or we're going to collapse. So that's a little bit about why, conservation and forest management is so important right now, I think, because we are reaching some thresholds in globally. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what's so special about tropical Asia. And as you can see on this map here, produced by Norm Myers in 2000, it's kind of mapping out the global biodiversity hotspots. There's a lot of controversy about how you define hotspots and so forth. But just look at tropical Asia. The entire region is basically a hotspot, and including Sri Lanka and the Western Ghats. You have Borneo, Philippines, Wallacea, and it's kind of strange that Papua is not there. It probably is just simply numbers. If you really got down to it, I think Papua is certainly as interesting and as important and as any of these other biodiversity hotspots in Asia. So I mean, the region is obviously very interesting in terms of its biological diversity. And on the other hand, there's also a tremendous diversity of human cultures and languages and economic territories and political systems in the region. I really apologize for not having India on this slide. I've been having so many difficulties, and I will update this in the future. So if we look at the map of Southeast Asia, we've got China in the blue, and going down through Indochina, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar. Every one of those countries has a substantially different language, scripts, religions vary between places. Then you go into Thailand, is a place that's was never colonized, and so you have different political histories. They have a very strong culture. And you go down into Malaysia and Indonesia. Indonesia's the big red country, of course. It's kind of a stealth country. It's amazing. It's a huge, very important country globally, but you actually hear very little about it. In those two countries, between Malaysia and Indonesia, you have different colonial histories, with Malaysia being British and then Indonesia being Dutch in the past. And so, those different colonial powers had different effects on the development of those countries. And within Indonesia, I mean, you can imagine this huge area. There's an enormous amount of culture, an enormous amount of language in that archipelago. And, they're unified by this national language, by this national democracy, but there's a great deal of language and cultural and religious diversity in the archipelago, and that makes it incredibly hard to govern as a single country. And in the Philippines, and you have a country that's largely Christian in an area that has mostly Buddhist or Islamic populations. And in Papua, I mean, I've never been there. I don't know that much about it, and it has its own history. And so the whole region is very diverse. And if you think about the Indian subcontinent, then you're talking about an entirely different system, bewildering system of languages and cultures there. And in some ways, I can only hold so much in my mind at one time. And India has just been this huge, wow, it would take a lifetime to get to know India well. And I'm really glad we've got some students here involved in this course, and they can help instruct us about the things that are going on there. Another thing that's very notable about Southeast Asia is that there's a very high level of endemism throughout the archipelago, and this again is kind of limited to Southeast Asia from a publication by Navjot Sodhi a few years ago. But it's kind of showing the levels of endemism for different groups, mammals, birds, reptiles, that you find in the different biogeographic regions. And you can see, oftentimes there is well over 50% endemism of species in any one of these regions. That's fantastic. Wow, what a wealth of biological diversity. But it also is a big challenge. I mean, there aren't that many scientists working on any one group in any one region. And then when you go to collaborate, the species are different. The communities are structured differently. You have an island archipelago in the Philippines versus Borneo, which is a very large landmass. And so this kind of biogeographic diversity and high levels of endemism actually make collaboration difficult on a fundamental basis of the biology. So you actually have different systems that have been independent of one another for long, millions of years. And so that makes it even more difficult. It's even another challenge for foresters working in tropical Asia, kind of at that high level of the entire region. So kind of summarizing some of these basic ideas here, I think conservation biology really ranks among one of the most difficult scientific disciplines that humanity faces. We really do have to bring together two different systems, forest ecosystems, which evolve very slowly. Communities can persist, for easily hundreds of years without really that much turnover, versus human societies and economies that, if they last more than 200 years, they're long-lived. And so bringing those two things together in a sustainable fashion, I think, is it even possible? And if it's not that possible, what kind of implication does that have for how we should be thinking about forestry? Global trends are daunting around the world, and again, as I mentioned, kind of particularly as fewer and fewer people live in nature, I think communicating with those people the value and importance of biodiversity kind of becomes more and more difficult. Unless, that's kind of what this course is about. Can we exploit some of this sharing technology, social networking technology, to bring people in and make them understand and appreciate the worth of nature? Sustainability, is it a natural concept? I personally don't think so. I think to behave sustainably, you actually have to go against your inherent biological characteristics and properties. And so as a human society, can we do that? Can we be better than bacteria? I've always kind of said that, humans are no better than bacteria in a broth. Why should we expect not to just kind of drown in our own, waste and like most other communities do? And can we do this? Can sustainable systems be developed? And of course, we're kind of wrapping up why we're so interested in tropical Asian forests is that they hold a tremendous amount of diversity, and they face a very large number of difficult challenges in the near future. I kind of wanted to mention as well, kind of in line with this course, and it's kind of coming out there more and more often, is that we really do need a fundamental change. We need a new era of environmental accountability, where rules are enforced, the rule of law has real teeth in terms of whether you are, damaging the environment or not. We really have to have those kinds of enforcement to change behaviors. If you just look at the laws that are on the books right now, both nationally and internationally in many situations, if those laws were simply strictly enforced, things would be much better than they are right now. And we just need to develop ways to enforce those laws. And remote sensing is a great thing. It's already been helping a great deal to fight illegal forest conversion and the spread of forest fires. LiDAR has great promise in giving this kind of high-tech, highly detailed view of forests and their three-dimensional structure, their carbon storage and so forth, their above-ground carbon storage. And that kind of leads to this idea of citizen science, where the general public can contribute to gathering useful, high-quality data, and maybe even help analyzing it. It's already proven valuable in other fields, like in mathematics. They've solved equations that have been standing, for long periods of time, and people have come together on the internet and solved this. I'll be talking a little bit about some other efforts where people have, been using the power of large numbers of people just kind of contributing a little bit to analyzing data can really make a big difference. So, a big focus in this course will be thinking about how we can develop opportunities for citizen scientists to contribute to monitoring and managing forests in Asia. And that's going to be the end of video 1.